On our first Diablo 2 build this week, we're going to be taking a look at a classic build that has always had a bit of a cult following for the Necromancer, the Commander Necromancer, or in our case, the Aura Commander. Sharing a lot of similarities with the Fishymancer and able to be built in much the same way, the Commander instead takes a much more active role in combat, fighting alongside his minions rather than standing behind them. As you can tell by the name, we're also using this to address an aura challenge that was posted in the comments a while back, wanting to see a massive stack of auras. So remember, some decisions were made specifically for that kind of challenge. In terms of stats, this build follows the general rule of thumb for builds that require blocking. In other words, enough strength for your gear and enough dexterity for at least 70% blocking, ideally 75%, and the rest dumped into vitality. The reason we want this blocking is because we will be in the front lines with our summons, and if an enemy, like say a Frenzy Tor, takes interest in us, we want to be able to have a better chance at survival in case they do decide to come straight for our throat and get a few lucky hits. Skill-wise, the optimal setup is going to be making sure your summons are up to par, and that you have the curses to support it, and everything else outside of that is just icing on the cake. This means 20 skeleton mastery and 20 summon skeleton right off the bat, and 1 point in every curse up to Decrepify. Outside of that, there are a few options, with the best ones being either Corpse Explosion, Golemmancer, or Poison Support. On this character, I actually went with Poison Support since I also wanted to test a slightly different loadout before respeccing, and it wouldn't make a major difference in the overall performance of this particular build because, well, we're just using this as a support skill rather than our main killing ability. For the Corpse Explosion variant, which is what most of you will probably want to go with, it's literally just invest in Corpse Explosion until it reaches the mid-30s with plus skills, which is more than enough to clear most rooms and packs you come across, as more points do not increase damage, they only increase the radius and mana cost, and at the mid-30s you actually reach most of the screen. And the remaining points can go either into boosting the radius of amplified damage, so you have to cast it less, or making your golem even tankier. For the Golemmancer, you instead invest in your Golem boost, namely Mastery, and by doing so you open up a couple of options for Golem. Of course, Clay Golem is the safe and reliable, and usually the one that I would go with unless I was flush with resources. But you can also pack auras and cast effects on your Golem itself using various pieces of equipment on an Iron Golem, with obvious expensive choices like Pride for concentration, Beast for fanaticism, etc. But you can also do cheaper items like Lawbringer or Insight, which have interesting bonuses as well. Lawbringer giving you a chance at Decrepify, Insight giving you Meditation, etc. Though Insight is only of limited use for this build specifically, unless you're running something that spams spells like the Corpse Explosion version. It is used for others, of course. For this run, I decided to go cheap and stay with Clay Golem since I will be respeccing out of this build in the long run and don't want to waste items on the Iron Golem, but it is still fun to mess around with more esoteric stuff from time to time. For the Poison support, it's simply just putting spare points into Poison Nova and its synergies, and if so desired, you can even build this into a Daggermancer variant, but for the sake of simplicity, we went with the Aura-based build this time, since explaining Poison Dagger and trying to do the Aura Commander with it would get really complicated really fast, and yeah, Poison itself can take an entire video. As far as our mercenary, we went full offensive with a Pride on him for, well, concentration, and he's a Might mercenary himself. This gives us well over 500% enhanced damage. I think at the calculation it was like 560 something percent from just the mercenary alone. Of course, pairing that with resist and leech and the armor and helmet to help him out, we are already getting decent damage on our minions, and we haven't even gotten into curses or our necros auras yet. As far as our gear though, since we're going entirely ham on auras and I'm going Poison Support, that gives me an excuse to use Bramble Armor that I've kind of had collecting dust for way too long. We haven't really brought it out of retirement anytime recently. Though if you want to go for more bone skills, the Runeward Bone is a good option, and if you go more into Golems or Corpse Explosion, I would fully recommend going for either Enigma or Chains of Honor if you have access to them. Of course, Enigma being easily the strongest option since it allows you to perform teleport stomps on extremely tough enemies or even easy enemies with your extremely buffed army. And yeah, it will outclass everything else. You will just chop things down with that teleport. And yes, this is even compared to Bramble with Thorns and Amplify Damage, which generally don't do near as much as just getting your army on top of something. As far as the other armor pieces, it kind of comes off of Bramble since I leaned into a bit into hit recovery since we were already getting that 50% hit recovery from Bramble. That means Crown of Ages for an extra 30% plus all skills and resists, and 2 sockets that you could do what you want with them. Go ahead and ignore the lightning rainbow facets in this one. Those are actually for another build. A downside of this helmet is the strength requirement, which is pretty steep, but it does bring us up to 80% hit recovery with Well, the inclusion of one more thing, which is Verdungo's Belt, meaning when we are hit, we are able to recover from it fairly quickly, because the breakpoint is 86% for those wondering, and on top of reasonable resist and damage reduction from all this, we are fairly tanky and fairly able to get out of bad situations easily. After that, we're pretty much just sticking to skills and more offensive perks, with High Lords and Bulkathos in the jewelry slots, sneaking in a Ravenfrost for Cannot Be Frozen, Lava Gout for an auto-cast of Enchant to keep our attack rating up, since our weapon swap is actually used for Call to Arms and Spirit instead of Demon Limb, because Demon Limb is irritating and annoying to keep up. On the boots, we grabbed a bit of Crushing Blow and Bleed through Gore Riders, which are always solid boots, and sliding in an Homunculus for the shield, since quite frankly, it's a fairly awesome shield with plus skills, great blocking perks, and resist all. It only has some slim competition for the slot. Things like Storm Shield could be competition. You have a few set combinations that can be competition. You have GG rare heads that can be competition, but that's about it, which is a very narrow field. Finally, we have the main weapon for the more attack-oriented variant of this, and that is the Beast Berserker Axe, which has tons of amazing perks and is going to make you a boss-killing machine, even with just you and your mercenary, much less with a fully tweaked-out army supporting you with fanaticism. It's also possible to go less aura-heavy with different weapon choices, but those are for another build since they tend to focus on using support skills like Poison Nova, Poison Dagger, or even strange mercenary setups to get the most effect out of them, and this one is generally just the most reliable of the bunch. So, do you have a classic or modern build you'd like to know more about, or possibly a challenge you'd like to see attempt at a building for? Mention it down below, and you may see it in an upcoming video. And as always, a special thanks to channel patrons, members, and viewers for making this content possible.